All right, let's talk about a feature in iOS development that is super powerful, but honestly gets overlooked way too often. We're talking about accessibility traits. Let's dive in and see how these can make our apps way more inclusive. Okay, so picture this. You're using an app, but you can't actually see the screen. You navigate to an element, and your screen reader tells you something is there. But what is it? What does it do? Is it a button you're supposed to tap? Or is it just some static text, a label or maybe a title? Without that key piece of information, you're basically stuck. You have no idea how to interact with the app, and that's got to be incredibly frustrating. And that right there is the core problem we're tackling. For anyone who relies on assistive tech like VoiceOver, that's Apple's screen reader, of course, a beautiful UI can feel like a silent, confusing maze. It creates this huge context gap. It's really that simple. When an element on the screen doesn't say what it is or what it does, the user is left completely in the dark. This doesn't just hurt the user experience, it can totally break it, making an app feel unusable. So, how do we fix this? How do we bridge that gap? Well, the solution is actually pretty elegant, and it's built right into iOS. We just need to teach our UI elements a kind of secret language they can use to talk to assistive tech. And that language is accessibility traits. Now, this is super important. Traits are not just labels. They're all about function. They tell VoiceOver if something is a button, if it's currently selected, if it's a heading. You get the idea. Think of them as the digital signposts for your entire app. Okay, let's pop open the toolkit and look at the most common, most essential traits you're going to be using all the time. These are the absolute fundamentals for building an accessible app. First up, the big one, the classic, the button. This trait tells the system, hey, this thing right here, it's interactive. Tapping it will make something happen. Now, a standard UI button gets this trait for free, which is great. But what about that custom view you built, the one with the tap gesture recognizer? Without you telling it, VoiceOver has no idea that view is interactive. You have to add the dot button trait to let it know what its job is. Next in our toolkit is the link. Now, this one can feel a little bit like a button, but its purpose is actually very different, and assistive technologies know that difference. Think of it this way. A button does something on the screen you're on, like submits a form. A link takes you somewhere else entirely. But using the dot link trait, VoiceOver can tell the user exactly what to expect, which is a huge deal for clarity. So let's break it down side by side. For a button, VoiceOver says button. For a link, it says link. It seems like such a small difference, right? But that one word changes everything for the user. It sets the right expectation and makes the experience so much clearer. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about structure and making your app easier to get around in. And for that, we have the header trait. Imagine a really long article or a complicated settings screen. A sighted user can just scan the big, bold headings. Well, the header trait gives that exact same superpower to VoiceOver users. They can use a feature called the rotor to just jump from heading to heading, skipping all the stuff in between. It is a massive time saver. All right, now this is where it gets really powerful. See, you don't have to just pick one trait. You can actually combine them to give an even richer, more precise description of what's going on. Check out this example of a tab bar. A tab is, at its heart, a button, right? So we start there. But we also need to tell the user which tab is the active one. So you just add the dot selected trait. Boom. Now VoiceOver can announce both its role and its state. It's perfectly clear. So why do we obsess over these little details? Because getting this right is a huge win. Not just for your users, but for you, the developer too. Here's the payoff. Right away, you make navigation way better. You cut down on user confusion, and your app just feels more polished, more native, and genuinely inclusive. Oh, and as a little bonus, this stuff comes up in iOS interviews all the time. It shows you really care about quality. If you take away just one thing today, please let it be this. Accessibility traits are not just about reading a label out loud. They are about providing the meaning, the context behind what you see on the screen. And that really leads to the big question you should be asking yourself. Your app might work just fine for you, but does it work for everyone? When you use traits correctly, you're not just adding a feature. You're building a bridge, and you're inviting everybody in. It's a small bit of code that makes a world of difference.